conditions. So they're actually quite nice, and then they're not. They're just containers. They tried to make them nice. I mean, they actually had them joined together, and they have a bathroom in between you share. They had air conditioning. Oh, that was nice. But the bags, the sandbags, I mean, I don't know what they were worried about because we never got any rain. Okay. And if there's any questions, just holler, jump in. Back up in the top, there's kind of a typical same thing. They just stacked them all together and put some tin roofs on them. You'd see those contain those, what do you call it there, where they have the pallets of water. They'd sit out in the sun. So when you go grab your water, you got to put them in the fridge or they're too hot to drink. And then down at the bottom is a typical of the transitional quarters. They were tents. And they had the fireproofing on them, and I think these even have, they have vents on them. I don't know if those are the mortar catchers or what, but that's typical of what you saw over there a lot. And you're not going to bring a lot of that stuff back. It's been sitting there for years. Okay. This is Alpha Palace, Camp Victory Base. I have a picture. I don't know if anybody's seen Captain Ordinero on the TV. He's our chief of staff right now. He's a 4-star now. Then he was a 3-star, and he was the commander. And that palace was surrounded by water. That was one of Saddam's palaces. And I got my cheat notes here, so Camp Victory Base complex was a series of small bases all connected, and they all surrounded what's called the Baghdad International Airport. So we controlled the airport on the southern part of Baghdad. And the primary component of the Victory Base, or VBC, was Camp Victory, and it was the location of the Alpha Palace. That was his headquarters. And General Ordinero was the last guy to give up what he had. He was not going to let them have this until the very end. Because they wanted to come in and do some kind of thing. They wanted to come in and do something, and he said no. He just said, it's ours until we leave. Okay. Oh, there I am in front of that palace. Remember that Iraq only has 36 miles of water, right? That I told you. When Iraq and Iran were at war, Iran captured the port city called Fa in February of '86. And the palace was surrounded by water on all sides. It was built following our Allied effort in the 1990-91 Gulf War, which left Saddam Hussein still in power. And it was built by him in honor of his soldiers who freed the port city of Fa from the Iranian control back in 1988. And over the walls on the inside, it says, "Victory and glory to the warriors who freed the city from the enemy, the Persians." That's who they refer to the Iranians as. Okay? That's typical of what I saw all the time. The day before, this is right outside where I worked, that's the visibility you saw. Then the day after, I could see. In the Alpha Palace, I could see from where I worked from the G4, which was the logistics commander for the forces of Iraq. And then down below is my future son-in-law, and he was stationed there at the same time. He was a guard for Iraqi prisoners at Camp Cropper. They had a different name for it, and I won't say it. When he asked me if he could marry my daughter, I don't know if you noticed, you can barely see it, but he had an M203, which is an M16 with a grenade launcher, and all I had was a 9mm, so I said, sure. Next slide, please. All right, this is interesting because I didn't realize these slides, but I remember the day. So the next series of slides were taken as I approached Baghdad on 19 August 2009 at around 5:30 in the afternoon. I was just returning from northern Iraq. I had visited a few bases, and I had to meet my counterpart commander and the units up there in the 402nd Army Field Sustainment Brigade, which is part of AMC. And what they did was they issued and turned in equipment. And what happens is they decided to pool equipment, and they call it stay behind equipment. So when a unit came in, they would draw their equipment from AMC, sign for it, take it off with them. When they got done, they'd turn it back in. AMC would put it into repair. They had contractors there and military units that would fix them and turn around and issue them back out to the next units that came in. And she can tell you about signing for equipment in a short moment. Anyway, this is a typical clear day. All right, next slide. All right, visibility wasn't the greatest, but then again, there's a lot of dust. I didn't think too much of this day. Next slide. That's the typical downtown Baghdad. Remember I said it was 19 August 2009. You can go on the internet and look this date up. I found out the very next morning as we were listening to our briefings to General Ordinero that it was not a good day for the Baghdad people. Next slide. Here's a typical close-up. I took my camera and zoomed in on those houses. I was going to look at what was on that one guy's door there, but I didn't have a chance. It's a picture of some person, I'm not sure what. But that's typical of their homes, and they don't last very long over there. In Kuwait I saw it, and in Baghdad I saw it. Oh, you're getting ahead of me. Okay. No, it's all right. Go back to that one. 19 August 2009 Baghdad bombings. You can look that up on the internet. It was the result of 3 coordinated car bomb attacks and a number of mortar strikes in the Iraq capital of Baghdad. And the explosives went off simultaneously across the capital at 10:45 in the morning and resulted in the killing of 101 and wounding of at least 565 people. So this was one of their deadliest days since 2007. Today, if you watch and read the newspapers, and I'm sure you've seen it, in little small print in the corners, they'll show every day people are dying in Iraq. They're trying to destabilize their government there and try to do it just like Syria. When I was at Victory Base and some of the other bases up north, we had rocket attacks, but it never seemed real because it was over before you knew it. But unless you were the one that was standing there when it hit you. My son-in-law where he was standing the next day, a rocket hit his spot where he normally stood guard, but he was on a different detail. And so he has a picture of it, which he wasn't supposed to take, but he did anyway. So that's just how it is over there. It didn't seem real, but it happened. Okay. The unfinished, damaged Victory over America Palace. Why would you call it Victory over America? Well, whenever you leave somebody in power over there like Saddam, he wins. I just put little stats up there so you can see Gulf War and Operation Desert Storm because they're part of the same. Saddam was still alive and in power after the first Gulf War. And then I was in Korea at the time serving a 1-year tour over there. And I worked with the chief of material, so we saw the material that was going from Korea to Iraq. And if North Korea wanted to do something then, they could have done it. We waged a war, if you remember, with 34 coalition nations in response to Saddam invading Kuwait. And Saddam was actually interviewed in this place by Dan Rather before we hit them. Okay, here's the entrance or the front of it. Next. That's the inside entrance to it. And we had a tour. There was a unit there that volunteered. They had volunteers, and once or twice a month on a Sunday or a Saturday, I can't remember which day it was now, but they would give us a tour of this place. And we hit this along with the Ba'ath Party headquarters when we did the first strikes in 2003. But there was nobody in the palace at the time because it was still under construction. Okay. And that's another view from where I was standing now that everybody's left. It's huge. I don't know if you can notice it, but over in the right corner there, underneath that overhang, that's where a missile strike hit, and it was pretty devastating. Okay. And then this is just a view from the top. Water looks beautiful, doesn't it? Don't fall in it. If you get falling in that water, malaria, everything else, it's not drinkable. You go to the dispensary and you get lots of shots.
What river is it?
Pardon?
What river?
It's not a river, it's artificial.
Oh.
Saddam created all these lakes. Water is power in the Middle East. So if you have water, you're projecting your power as a person. He stole all this water from the nearby countryside. So they didn't have any water in their wells, and they didn't have any water for their crops. People actually starved during that time frame. But he created all his lakes there for himself. And they were stocked with fish, and they had boats, and it's amazing what they had there. All right. If you click on it, on the screen itself, I don't know if it's going to work. Did it work? Let's see. This is the only one that works right now. Let's see. Go back. Huh. I don't know what happened there. Ah, there we go. That was just skip it. All right. It was just a rolling shot just to show you. But you can see up in the corner, way in the back corner, there's Alpha Palace, and then there's the Bath Party headquarters that we hit. And I can't remember exactly how many people were in that building at the time when we hit, but that was all their head leadership that we took out all at once. Unfortunately, it was also a few other folks that were with them. This is a flag that I flew there, and I gave to my father. He was a veteran from mid-1950s. He was a occupation Austria soldier during the Cold War. Okay. Now that's just, I thought I'd show that up. How many people here are construction or engineers? That's the typical workmanship behind all the facade. They just filled in the walls with whatever they could find. And then the different layers of cement that don't quite match and lots of gaps. The sand over there has been blowing around for thousands of years. So to make anything out of sand over there is just, it won't stand. It'll break apart. But that's the typical thing. They had glass bottles, they had garbage, everything you could think of in the walls. And then a lot of their marble was thin marble, but it also was fake marble. They actually took, I don't know what it's called, but they took salt and something else and compressed it, made it look like tile, like marble. So it didn't last long either. Okay. This is one of the last two remaining mosaics of Saddam. He had his pictures everywhere. And like the story says, Saddam never was in the military, but he liked being in power, and he liked to dress himself up, make himself look like a great military leader. And then that's my future son-in-law down next to me. And this was at a Republican Guard headquarters. There were military buildings everywhere we looked to guard his palaces. Okay. Now this is where I'm going to transition, and I'll see how she does, so I can get off the mic, but I'll help her out when I can. Before I do that, one of the things I most remember about being in Iraq was the morning briefs with General Ordinero. At the end of his briefings, he would have us, we'd have to all, no matter where you were and what buildings, because we saw this all by VTC, we'd have to come to attention, and the last slide of the briefing would always be either of a airman, soldier, Marine, Air Force, or civilian, and they would tell the story of a soldier who, or that person who lost their life in Iraq. And so you would get to know where they came from, where they grew up, you know, anything that they had that was a personal story about that. So every briefing that General Ordinero closed with was a tribute to a soldier or a civilian or airman or Marine or Air Force, whoever it was. And now you knew and understood why you were doing what you were doing, and everything was important no matter what. So that's stuck in my mind a lot. This is typical of the